And so going to New York City was quite the change. And then I currently work for Google. They have a special projects division called X. So I work at Google X in the robotics division.
I can go next. I'm Ria. I just finished my first year at MIT. I'm planning on majoring in mechanical engineering and computer science. And in my free time, I like to hike. I play water polo.
I'm interested in mechanical or electrical engineering. And in my free time, I like spending time with my siblings and going fountain hopping with my friends.
Cool. So all three of you were or are at a great college. So how is or was it being a student? How's it like?
I think for me, what was most surprising is everyone is like super smart, but also really dumb. And it's really funny because there'll be people in like the computer room working on the electricity and magnetism P set. And then in the next room, someone will be trying to skateboard using a rope tied to a golf cart. And like both of those can exist simultaneously. But my favorite part is that everyone has really strong interests outside of academics. So I have a friend who's really into maps, and he makes like a really detailed map every week for the school newspaper. Or I have a friend who's really into coffee, and he runs a coffee blog. And it's really fun to be able to support them in their non-academic activities too.
For me, what stood out the most this year was how passionate everyone is about the things they're studying and the things they spend their time on, and how much time and effort they're willing to put into the things they're excited about. And that's really inspiring to see.
For me, I thought what was really cool is the opportunities you have in college. In general, if you want to talk to your teacher or professor, and you go into the real world and work, it costs $1,000 an hour to talk to one of these professors. But when you're in school, you have access to them for free. So it's just one example of cool opportunities you get in school. And so I think taking advantage of that was a pretty cool thing that I learned in my college time.
How did each of you begin to get interested in STEM?
So I did a camp when I was in sixth. We went to this like place in Marin maybe, and there was 12 of us sixth graders, and they said you can build whatever you want, and we built a roller coaster. And I thought it was so cool because I got to use all these power tools. I learned how to use a drill for the first time, and like a chop saw, which is like this really big spinning blade. And I thought it was so cool that I was able to do that. So when I came back from that camp, I was like, oh, I don't know when, but I want to be able to use those tools again. And for me, that came in high school when I got to join my school's robotics team, which I think Rhea and I will talk about a little bit later.
For me, I first got super excited about STEM in sixth grade when I did the Tech Challenge, which was a competition run by a local science museum where they give you a little task and you have to build something to complete it. So I did it 2 years. One of the years the project was to launch eggs onto a platform. And so we had to build something to actually launch the eggs and protect them. And so I had a lot of fun working with my friends to like build something to protect the eggs, and we built like a catapult to launch them, and I just had a lot of fun. Similar to what Reika said, using the tools and bringing something exciting to life and seeing. For
me, it was my sister told me to put a diet. She told me to get a bottle of Diet Coke and then put Mentos in it. And so I didn't know what was going to happen, but then I put the Mentos in it, and I realized it causes a pretty severe reaction. And I did this in like sixth grade. And so I was interested in like reactions and sort of the science after that. And that got me into science. And then math was always appealing. So that's sort of how I got into STEM, the Mentos in particular.
So Ray and Rekha, you were both a part of your high school robotics team. Tell us what your roles were on the team, and how did you first get involved in robotics?
So I first got involved in robotics. We had a clubs fair when I was in ninth grade, And I was really drawn to the robotics table for two reasons. Number one, they were giving out free t-shirts. And number two, I knew that they had the power tools that I kind of wanted to work with from sixth grade. And so since I took that free t-shirt that day, I was like, oh, I guess I have to go to a meeting. So I went to one of the meetings and I loved it. They showed us the lab, which was amazing. And I got to meet all these older girls who were interested in robotics who I really admired and looked up to. And that's kind of how I initially got into it. And by the end of my time there, I was the lead of entrepreneurship for robotics. So that's everything on that team that wasn't technical. We were completely student run. So that was all of our relationships with our sponsors, everything related to competition, et cetera, et cetera. And I was also on the build team. So I still get to use those tools that I came for and was involved with the technical aspect as well.
So I joined for similar reason. I saw them at the clubs fair. I was kind of iffy about if I wanted to do robotics, but I'd enjoyed my experience with the tech challenge in middle school, so I thought I'd sign up. And so for the first 2 years, I was on the programming team, which means we were writing the code to like actually move the robot. And then my junior and senior years, I was on the build team, so working on like the design and actually putting together the robot, machining the parts. So by the end, I was the mechanical lead for the team.
So this is for Reika and Ria again. How did doing robotics influence you academically and in other areas of life?
For me, robotics definitely proved to me, I think, that I could do STEM. I think if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have gone into a STEM major after high school. And I still talk about robotics all the time in so many things I applied for, because I learned a lot about leadership and how to run a team and how to manage intergroup conflict. And I value that a lot. I think it was one of the most formative experiences in my high school.
Very similar. I also, just academically, I realized I love robotics and it's what I want to do long term. I also learned a lot about like managing a team, collaborating with people. We also worked a lot we had mentors who were industry professionals. So working with adults who are professionals in the field was really valuable.
Abhishek, your initial focus on computer science was not robotics. Can you share how you got started and shifted to robotics over time?
Well, I took my first computer science class in my freshman year of college on a choice. It was a good thrown-in experience. I'm glad it happened. And then after I took that class, I sort of knew that I liked computer science, but I didn't know sort of what area I wanted to focus on. So I tried different things. Some things include working in like banking, working in consulting, working for the government, trying cybersecurity, trying sort of machine learning, these different fields you've probably heard of. Also tried the buzzword, the blockchain. I bought some Bitcoin. Did not make any money, sadly, but also tried that. And then I sort of realized as I went through these different experiences, one core theme that was shared was that when you build the software, or basically these instructions to communicate with the computer, a lot of times you have imprecise communication, and because we're humans, we make mistakes. So we find errors in these instructions, or we find errors in our code. And so I really got into the safety aspect of it. How do you make things more secure? How do you make things safe? How do you avoid these errors, automatically find these errors? And one interesting sort of application of this idea was robotics. In robotics, if you make an error, people can die. And a more serious scenario than building a website. If the website breaks, no one can visit it, which is, I think, less bad than like, I don't know, a robot sort of drilling into someone's hand if you're in the surgery room. So the consequences matter a lot more in robotics, which is why I was drawn to it.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Google right now?
Yeah, so Google, as probably most of you know, provides a search engine. So you Google something, but they also have different parts. They have a special projects division called X. In this special projects division, they work on sort of these things called moonshots. The idea behind a moonshot is you want to build something that improve society by a factor of 10x. And so some of the projects include something called Waymo, which is self-driving cars, something called Project Loon, which is internet-powered balloons, and I work on a robotics team that's trying to do robotics for the world.
So what advice would you give to someone who's interested in robotics for a career?
Cool, because it combines a lot of fields. When you do website development, I think it's limited in most respects. You can't really build things that interact with the real world. In robotics, you can connect the digital world, the physical world. I think a lot of people like building technology for good. And one of the most immediate ways to do that is robotics, because you can connect these sensors that sort of interact with us in the world, process them with some computer science knowledge, and then sort of output and affect the world, which is really interesting as opposed to like just pure software, which typically doesn't interact with humans. So I think if I had to give a piece of advice, whatever your interest may be, I think you can find a way to get yourself into robotics, even if it's like user experience and design. I think we still haven't figured out a good way to interact with a robot. Should we talk to it? Should we gesture with it? Should we touch it? Should we write in a language, like send an email? We haven't figured that out. So there's also like user experience sort of issues with that. So I wouldn't just limit robotics to like STEM, but if you're into STEM, it's a good place to go to.
So for Reika and Ria, you guys are both doing internships related to robotics this summer, but in very different areas. Could you guys talk about what you have been doing this summer?
I'm working at a company called Fetch Robotics. It's based in San Jose, and we build robots that help people and moving them around so people don't have to do that heavy lifting. So my project is specifically focused on computer vision. And so basically we're using images from cameras to the robot doesn't run into them.
So I'm doing something very different, more adjacently related to robotics. I'm working at a venture capital firm. VC, I don't know how much you guys know, it's really big in Silicon Valley. But basically what a VC firm does is they raise a lot of money from a lot of different investors, and they invest it in really early stage companies, so startups. And I'm working on the talent side. But what's really interesting is that even in VC and in business, these skills that I've learned from robotics are still very much valued. And it's really cool for me to see, I've been working a lot on the technical side, and I'm usually pretty focused on the technical side, but it's really interesting to see how once you have these people who have a vision, who have the technology, everything else that goes into getting that technology and consumers can interact with.
So this question is for all of you. Do you have a project that you've been working on or have worked on that you would like to share with us?
So from January to June, I took this class in school called Designing for Pediatrics, which was really interesting. It was cross-listed in the engineering school, the medical school, and the design school. So it was kind of like a biomedical design project. And we got to talk to a lot of the parents of babies, so like really young babies or maybe babies who are born too early. They have a lot of issues with feeding because maybe they can't take milk or their systems aren't fully developed. So we focused specifically on that space. And I got to spend 10 weeks kind of shadowing the hospital and talking to nurses and occupational therapists about what they think would be best to help these babies. And my partner and I came up with a system for standardization of bottle flow. And I don't know how much sense that makes to you, but what was really interesting for me was this engineering mindset and using the same skills of like, what is a problem for the consumer? And these are the ways we can fix it.
So something I worked on this year at school, and I worked on a device for patients who have had strokes, and so they've lost sensation in their feet. And so what that means is their feet are basically numb, and that makes it really hard to walk. So I worked on a device that's sort of like a shoe the patients can wear and sends a different sensation to the lower back of the person. So sort of like substituting the sensation they would usually get in their feet. And the idea behind that was that it would make it easier for these patients to regain a normal gait cycle and walk normally again.
I have a funny one, I think. So in college, there was this girl I sort of sat next to in this class, and we talked for a bit, and I wanted to ask her out. And I learned quickly she wanted to see this comedian, and this comedian happened to have shows in New York City. And the way to get these tickets to these shows was through filling out a form, not by paying money. So I wrote this program, this piece of code, that would fill out this form really quickly. And I tried for 2 months. And then finally, on the second month, I got these tickets. And I was super excited. And so when I went to ask this girl if she wanted to see it, she told me she was busy that night because she was going out for a date with her boyfriend. So it's a tragic story, but it's a pretty cool project.
Yeah, those sound like very cool projects that you guys have been working on. For Reika and Ria, what do you think you might want to major in at college and do once you graduate?
So I'm planning on majoring in mechanical engineering and minoring in computer science because those are two areas that are really relevant to robotics, and that's what I want to work on long term.
I'm anticipating a major in either mechanical or electrical engineering. And I want to work, and then I want to get my master's in management science and engineering, which sounds really fancy. It's basically business and a little bit of math, because I kind of want both sides. I think that's kind of evident in what I've been saying, but I want to have both the technical and kind of more business side. And then I'd like to work in robotics probably for a little bit after I graduate, and then move into product management.
If you have a chance to go back in time, what would you wish you had known before starting college?
For me, going into college, I was really intimidated, and I felt like everyone around me just knew so much more than I did. And so for the first few months, it was really hard for me to like ask questions, and I constantly felt like I needed to prove myself. And I think once I realized that everyone's there to learn and everyone's willing to answer questions and help you out, I was able to get a lot more out of my experience and learn a lot more once I was comfortable like asking my professors for help, or I felt comfortable like working with other people. I learned a lot more.
I think for me, it was really hard when I started getting into my math and science classes, and I'd be taking my midterms and my finals, and I'd be getting like 45%, 63%, 71%. And I was like, wow, I've never done this bad on anything in my life. Maybe I shouldn't be an engineer. And I spent a lot of time worried about whether or not I was good enough to be in engineering. And I think what I would have told myself going into college was that like forget about the grades, and focus more on whether or not I'm enjoying what I'm putting my time into.
Yeah, I like the last statement. It was really good. I think you should focus more on sort of what you want to do rather than who you want to be. I think like in high school and in college, you have these checklists, you take these classes, and then you sort of do this checklist. You finish your requirements, and then you graduate. And then you go into the real world and you realize there's not really a checklist anymore. And so you sort of realize this whole idea of checklist doesn't sort of work after the real world. And so the one piece of advice I wish I told myself earlier on is just focus on what I want to do. Don't really worry about checking off every checkbox, getting good grades. I think if you just really focus on what you want to do, I think everything else falls into place.
Who have been your mentors and why do you look up to them?
I look up to a lot of the women who are maybe in engineering a lot. Two people in particular, this one girl who's a biomechanical engineer with a minor in computer science at Stanford, and one of our TAs for physics actually was a experimental physics PhD, which is I can't even imagine being in that program. But and I admired them both a lot because they were doing really hard things and they were very confident in their ability to get it done and truly enjoyed what they were doing. But were also simultaneously very honest about what their challenges were and what was hard and when they doubted themselves. And I think it was really important for me as a young person, kind of considering these paths, to see both like, wow, there's really incredible people who are doing the things I want to do, and also these are some of the challenges I could face, and just because I'm facing these challenges doesn't mean I'm not good enough.
I think in college, I've been lucky enough to get to know people who are just like a few years older than me through my sorority or my dorm. And they've been really valuable mentors to help me with like picking classes or looking for internships and jobs, things like that. And then in addition, I really look up to the people who've mentored me through projects. So for example, right now, my mentor at robotics, she's helped me a lot, and she's someone who's doing stuff that I'm really interested in and is really willing to help guide me outside of work, which has been really nice.
For me, it's like, I mean, everyone says their parents, so the parents are always there. It's classmates for sure. The one I sort of tend to forget about is my high school teachers. I think they were instrumental in sort of making a difference in sort of the trajectory of my life. And I really thank my high school teachers for that. So I think they're mentors just for believing in sort of high school students and sort of the work they do. I don't think they're appreciated as much.
So now we have a couple speed questions. They're pretty informal. You can just give like one-word answers. So our first one is, what is your favorite book?
The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Mine is Pachinko. I don't actually remember the author.
I really like the Brother I'm Dying by Edwidge Denicat.
So do you have any favorite songs?
Finish Line by Chance the Rapper.
Beautiful People by Ed Sheeran.
There's a cringeworthy one and there's a real one. The cringeworthy one is like Rebecca Black Friday, and the non-cringeworthy one is like Vesuvius by Frank Ticelli.
What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Cookies and cream.
Chocolate chip cookie dough.
Pistachio.
What is your favorite animal?
Dogs.
Probably a koala.
That was my first. I'll go to a second. Parrots. Parrots are cool. They can talk.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
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 Will you choose summer or winter?
Summer. Sorry. My
Okay. So, what's your favorite food then? Favorite food?
Pizza.
Probably fried ice cream.
Salads for me.
Ooh.
Gotta say that for the kids. So.
If you guys could go anywhere in the world, where would you want to go?
I've always wanted to visit Kenya.
For me, it would be Bali, Indonesia.
The moon would be cool.
Okay, cool. So now we're going to open it up to questions. So if any of the students want to unmute themselves and ask the questions that way, or you can type it in the chat to everyone. Yeah, go ahead. There's no bad question or wrong question. They'll answer anything for you.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is college?
Oof.
I can try. I think my first 2 years, it was probably at like a 7 or 8, like really high. And then my last 2 years it went down to like a 4 or 5. Super manageable, I think. I think it's I think it's a trend that's pretty evident by my classmates too. So I think college gets easier. Just the first year tends to be the hardest, I think.
Yeah, I'd say probably at least a 7. But I feel like that sounds scary when you hear it. College is a lot harder than I thought it would be, but it's also way more fun than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I'd also say probably a 7. And yeah, there's a lot of work and the work is tough, but I think just meeting so many great people and like the fun things definitely outweighed the difficulty of the work. Overall, I've had a lot of fun this year.
Any other questions?
There's
What was
one
the
in the
best part of high school? College, I'm sorry.
Wait, pardon?
What was the best part of college?
The best part of college. I think for me, it was being in New York City is quite nice when you're 18 to 22. There's some cool things to do in New York City. So I think having a city experience was probably the best part for me.
I think the independence has been really nice. I was a little bit nervous about going all the way to Boston, but Boston's a great city, and it's nice to have the ability to just explore the city with my friends and have that independence.
I think for me, it was definitely all the people I've met. If you have the chance to live on campus, I love living in a dorm and with my friends, and that kind of community is something that you don't get in high school to the same extent, and that's one of my favorite parts of college.
There's a couple questions in the chat. What if my school doesn't have a robotics program?
I think there's still a lot of ways to get involved in robotics that's not specifically through a robotics program through your school. I think I'm like morally obligated to give the plug that you can start your own first robotics team, www.frcinspires.org or something like that. But I think if you have teachers that you admire in science or math, you can talk to them about kind of what programs are available in your area. I know here, I think it's called Blue Stamp.
Yeah.
There's like summer robotics programs, like one of them is Blue Stamp Robotics, and you can get involved over the summer or over the school year. There's sometimes community robotics programs as well.
What's your favorite part of programming?
So I'm going to be really honest, and I'm sure Abhishek, you have a way better answer for this. I hate programming, but I do. Like, I still took CS and I liked CS overall, even though I didn't love actually writing the code for hours. But I love, like, you start with a problem, and at least for me, I'm still very novice. You don't really know how to solve it, but like once you've figured out something in your program works, like there's nothing like that. Like, it's just really cool when it finally works.
It's funny you say that. I actually dislike programming too. I like the end goal, like building cool things, but programming can be annoying. But it's definitely something you just get used to, and you get better as time progresses. Just like you get better at writing or reading. It's a skill you sometimes just have to do to get to, like, I don't know, cool applications and building robotics.
Yeah, I think of programming more as a tool to do really cool things. So, for example, this internship I'm working on right now, doing computer vision is like seeing the final product and seeing the code actually work and detect the forklifts. Like, that's really exciting, and it's exciting to think about the broader applications of that and how similar things are used for like self-driving cars, for example. And so I think it's the end goal and the end product that are the things you can make with programming. That's what's really exciting to me.
So here's another question for all of you. What's your favorite subject? Like maybe in high school?
I think most people would probably say PE. But like aside from PE, I like history a lot. I think you can learn a lot from history. The history tends to repeat itself. So I really liked history in high school.
I think my favorite classes in high school were English. We were really lucky to have a really good English program, and we got to read a lot of really interesting books, and we had small class sizes, so it was really fun to discuss them and hear other people's thoughts on the same books.
I really liked English, and in high school, surprisingly, I really liked government. It was called American Political System, and we also had like kind of a philosophy class, which I really loved.
Do you like donuts? If yes, which flavor?
So I grew up in Louisiana. They have these cream-filled donuts called beignets. So I think that's my favorite one, beignets.
I like the Krispy Kreme chocolate, where it's like chocolate on top and then everything else is glazed.
Yeah, that's my favorite too.
Cool. Oh yeah. Do you want to ask your question, whoever that was?
If you could program and make a robot for anything you want, what would it be for?
I really just like doing dishes. So if I could build a robot to do the dishes for me, that would be ideal.
I do probably water transportation, because I think for a lot of girls and women who aren't able to be in school, a big reason for that is because they have to go walk to the wells and get water for their families in the mornings. Like my brother's foster mom, that's what she did every morning at 4 a.m. And I think if we were able to automate that very cheaply, that would be a great use of robotics.
Something I'm really interested in is medical robotics. So like robotic surgery and things like that. So something I'd be interested in working on.
Cool. So we're gonna start to wrap it up now. If you guys want to share one or two key takeaways that you would want the students to leave with, that would be great.
I think one thing I'd like to say is that I think when I was younger, STEM and robotics seemed pretty intimidating and hard, and I was kind of afraid to try things. And I also kind of thought like, oh, I'm not interested in robotics, or I don't really want to learn how to program. And I think being open-minded and trying new things is really important, and like you never know what you're going to end up loving. And so I'd say it's really important to, if you're given opportunities, just try things, and you never know what's going to end up being something that you love.
I think for me, two big things. One of them is when I was younger in middle school and elementary school, I was kind of like, I'm never going to be an engineer because math is hard. And I think what I wish I would have known is that like math is still hard, but that doesn't mean I can't do it. And it can be hard and still be fun and still be interesting. And I shouldn't have written off the entire field of engineering just because math is hard. And also, I think when I was younger, I had a very preconceived notion of what an engineer was. Like, they were boring and they just sat behind a computer all day and they didn't have a personality. And then, like, I got to high school and I did robotics and I met people like Ria, and Ria's pretty cool. And I think just being able to meet a lot of people in engineering and realizing that it's a field that I could see myself in. And then my biggest takeaway for you, I think, is that I always, in internships, in school, in classes, etc., I always do things that I'm a little bit not ready for. And I used to think that was a really bad thing. But I think the more I do it, the more I realize is like that's how I grow the most. So I think especially when you're young, it's really easy to be like, oh, I can't do that until I know I'm ready and I know I have all the skills. But if you try it out, it'll go better than you think it will.
Well, that's good. The two pieces of advice I have. One is these days, like the internet is open to sort of like the internet's just super powerful. You have like access to information that sort of I never would have imagined as a kid. So I think you should really use that to like learn whatever you want to learn, whether it's art history or STEM or user experience design. There's a lot of ways to learn. And the second thing is I think to enjoy your childhood. I think like the checklist approach, as I sort of mentioned earlier, doesn't work after college. So enjoy your childhood. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to get a bad grade. It's your childhood. You should enjoy it more than sort of the real world. I think I miss that. I sort of wish I told myself that when I was a kid.
Okay. So that wraps everything up. Thanks so much for talking with us today, you guys.